Good day, YouTube. I'm Daniel Claremont. I'm the Acadian therapist. Welcome back to lovely rural Nova Scotia. I hope that you're doing well. A pretty standard part of my professional practice is to bounce ideas off of trusted colleagues of mine. Usually this is in the form of different trainings or books or podcasts or resources that I'm investigating. Sometimes some challenging cases if we're butting heads or we're not moving forward, or if it brings up some different feelings or thoughts in me, well, it's very important for me to be able to bounce that off of someone. And when it came to designing YouTube content, well, of course I was going to engage in a similar process, and I usually bounce some ideas off of colleagues. When I bounced the idea of this week off of someone, I got a very strong reaction. I got a lot of reservation there. And of course, I'm going to talk about it anyway, but to me it highlighted how controversial the topic of spirituality can really be, how triggering it can be, but also it's so important to talk about. I think it can be such a source of strength for people, as well as a very important source of trauma that needs to be addressed in one way or another. So, strap on your skates, we're talking about a controversial topic, spirituality and mental health. As always, if you find value in this content, please feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. All of that helps support my work here. Let's get started. I want to start by acknowledging how deeply personal and confrontational discussion about spirituality and religion can usually get. In fact, if it's your intention to spark a fight or to be offended, to take something personally, you'll find something in this video. I want to refresh your memory on an earlier video that I made about competition versus cooperation. Sometimes we approach content looking to disagree with it, looking to define ourselves by that topic, to say, I really like that, or I really hate that, or you've got it wrong and I'm going to educate you on exactly how wrong you are. If that's your intention, that's fine. You can certainly put that in the comments, but I hope you will approach this topic with the open-mindedness that I am intending. I am hoping to, as always, present some different ideas, not because I'm right, because I might very well be wrong. I'm almost certainly wrong about some things. Most of us are. But if you can approach this topic with a curiosity and open-mindedness, it might unlock some new ideas for you that might expand your horizons. And that's always my intention. I absolutely am not looking to convert anyone or to change anyone's mind. However, it's important to note that even though spirituality and religion are not the same thing, and I'm going to be talking more about spirituality than any particular religion, there are some faiths that people belong to that, even considering other kinds of beliefs than what they have been taught in their religion, is extremely controversial. It's blasphemous. It will get you rejected from a happy afterlife. And so even watching this video or being seen to watch this video could get you judged or rejected by people in your community. So please do what you need to do to take care of yourself and perhaps to take care of your eternal soul. But I'm going to be talking in more general ways. So now with that disclaimer said, let's carry on. So I want to define what I'm referring to by spirituality. Like I say, I would view there being a difference between religion and spirituality. When I'm referring to spirituality, I mean the sense of connection to something greater than ourselves, something that might be even hard to put into words. Sometimes it's a feeling or a sensation. For me, I would liken it to an experience of wonder. You get exposed to something and you go, that's amazing. How remarkable that that can exist in life, in the universe, or some aspect of the universe itself that is mind-blowing, reflecting on what infinity is, or how vast the universe is, how ancient it is. It can also be the kind of wonder we experience as children, to say, oh my gosh, look at a butterfly, that's amazing. It started off as a caterpillar, it became goo, and then it became a butterfly. That's remarkable, how wonderful. Where do these things come from? How do these things come to be? So those kinds of questions that take us outside our everyday existence can uplift us. It can give us energy, and it can inspire great works of art. It can inspire new adventures that we take on, connecting with people and new kinds of thinking that we never would have considered before. So that would be spirituality as I'm going to be talking about it here. The reason I'm talking about it is often I talk about productivity and getting things accomplished. It can be helpful, and we've talked about values before. Spirituality is very compatible with that discussion about if you're going to be producing things, for what purpose? What inspires that? What is the meaning of your labor? What are you on this planet for? If you're going to accomplish these things, you're going to expend energy and money and time. You may even sacrifice relationships in pursuit of something. What's it for? Spirituality can help us to answer those questions. So an important part of my background is that I come from a science-oriented background. The notion of making sense logically and explaining things, not so much in a God made it so, but this is the product of natural processes that we can figure out. And so there are some that would view the practice of science as incompatible with religion. And in fact, in my clinical practice, I make use of a lot of evidence-based practices. That's really the foundation of what I do. Now, what an evidence-based practice is basically interventions and tools to help people that have been developed as theories and have been tested with different populations, and it's been published, and other scientists have replicated these results, or they've done it again and again. And so they have supported that, yes, these things are effective. When we do X, Y, and Z, it improves the quality of people's lives. So I very much believe in evidence-based practices and methods that are proven to be effective. I think it's very important to remember, though, that these methods have been developed by people based on their observations, their definitions, their criteria of what better means or healthier means at the time. And so because people have come up with it, it can very much be flawed, especially I think in psychology as compared to some other sciences. A lot of these things are really rooted in the product of their times. Take, for example, phrenology. I picked this up recently. This is a phrenology head. So at one point, this was considered an accepted science. It was essentially the science that you could study the shape of someone's skull, and I would have a pretty good skull to be able to determine that. You would study for different bumps and indentations, and you could actually compare to a somewhat standardized head like this that would say what different bumps or indentations meant about you as a person, about your intellectual ability, about whether you'd be a criminal, various things like that. This was an accepted practice. I think it was developed in the early 1800s, and even in the 1900s, the early 1900s, there were still practitioners of phrenology. Now these days, we don't believe in it. But it took a while. So it's important to bear in mind that what is established as science does not always stay a science. That doesn't mean we should automatically dismiss it, of course. But it does mean we should be open-minded. And an important bias to talk about is sometimes the scientists that develop a theory, well, it kind of becomes their baby. They become very invested in it. So if I develop the Claremont method, whatever that is. So I might spend years researching it and then get published in it, and then I come up with test groups and I evaluate it, and the Claremont method becomes standardized and it becomes the best approach for whatever I developed it for. And it has to be defended against academics. So again, that old notion of competition versus cooperation that I've talked about before, instead of the open-minded approach of saying, well, what matters the most is the progression of human knowledge and the best tools, human ego gets in the way, and we defend our creations even if something better comes along. So I think it's important for us when we consider evidence-based practices to remember the lessons of phrenology. Best practices evolve over time, and we have to be open-minded and flexible. Spirituality exists in that realm where it's hard to define, it's deeply personal, and it can be very challenging to prove. But a good scientist would say, just because we can't prove something yet, doesn't mean it's not provable. And to dismiss something just because we haven't proven it yet, I would say is also not scientific. It's not very open-minded. So I want to put that out there. If you believe in science, it doesn't make it incompatible necessarily with spirituality or religion. I feel it's important also to talk about some potential risks about spirituality. And so, if there's a spiritual practice that is encouraging you to ignore actual factual aspects of the world. So, for example, I just talked about evidence-based practices and some of those flaws. However, to just dismiss them, and sometimes you will see conspiracy theories, you'll see some people who will try to stir up a lot of fear or anger or doubt that will just automatically dismiss something. Well, just because a scientist says it's not true, that's accurate. It also doesn't automatically mean that it's false. And if something has been researched and studied and academics really believe in it, there's a lot of evidence that supports it, we should reject that with caution. And especially if you're talking, so if a client came to see me with some medical complaints, so if there is sleep issues or persistent pain issues, medical complications, I would certainly encourage that person to seek medical attention, because doctors are trained in various evidence-based practices and tools that have been proven to be somewhat effective in treating those things. If someone has a spiritual practice, my suggestion would be that spirituality complements medical interventions. It's not a replacement for it. And if you're considering completely dismissing the medical establishment, I hope that you will proceed with some caution while you do that. Really think it through, really be careful, because there are certain risks that you're taking with that. Another common risk with exploring your spirituality is you're risking rejection from your community, maybe your family, maybe some ancient traditions and rituals that have become important to your family. We talked about that last week, so I will refer you to last week's video on how to navigate exploring new choices for yourself, new identity pieces that might be at odds with the important people in your life. I think another important risk that can come with spirituality is the risk of being taken advantage of. So sometimes people will seek spirituality when they're facing a major crisis in their life, which means they are vulnerable. Now, people will seek out therapists for that as well, which is why I'm very happy to be a registered licensed professional. So that means I am held to certain ethical standards. It's inappropriate for me to take advantage of someone in a vulnerable state for my own gain. So you want to make sure if you're reaching out to a spiritual practice or a healer or a religion or an organization, to make sure that when you're in a vulnerable state, they're not looking to take advantage of that. There's a mutual benefit. There is a generosity there. I'm certainly not going to call out any one particular faith tradition, but there have been a lot of cults in the past, usually where there's a very charismatic leader that will stir up very strong emotions in people, and this can cause a lot of suffering and harm. So just be mindful of that, be open-minded, because there's been an awful lot of trauma that's been caused about that. In fact, that's what I'm moving on to next, is talking about religious and spiritual trauma. So unfortunately, history teaches us that there have been so many large organizations, governments, and religions which have caused a lot of pain and suffering in different parts of the world. In fact, I'm a social worker by training. I have to acknowledge that social workers have historically been part of causing great harm to some communities, and some social workers still do. And so it's important to acknowledge that whenever you have an organization or a system that has a lot of power, there is the risk of causing harm. And often this will take the form of trauma. In fact, maybe just watching this video, seeing the title of this video might have caused a bit of a reaction, a little bit of a fear response. Well, it could be argued that that is a form of trauma, a form of fear, that there's a threat in even just considering these ideas. And so it's important to acknowledge those emotions and to sort of work on that. As to how to work on that, I'm going to suggest exposing yourself to some new ideas. Now, this can be as simple as a YouTube search for meaning of life or philosophy, or maybe you've heard about some religion that you haven't practiced and you're a little bit curious to learn a little bit more about. Maybe Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or Taoism. This can lead you down all kinds of rabbit holes where you can get exposed to different beliefs. Now, as you're exposed to these beliefs, don't forget the mindfulness skills that we talked about before, which, by the way, ironically, mindfulness in Western world, especially in Western psychology, is very much being appropriated from some ancient Eastern religions. So mindfulness itself and yoga, same thing, has been appropriated from other faith traditions. So there is some spirituality that you can find linked to those practices. When I talk mindfulness, though, I just mean noticing, just to keep things simple. So as you watch this video, as you watch other YouTube videos, as you listen to podcasts or books or attend lectures or sit in on a different church service somewhere, notice what feelings are coming up. Be curious. Notice what feelings, fears, as well as, hopefully, some things you like, some things that you enjoy. Maybe you'll notice some part of you is shining or is happy or feels liberated. That mindfulness to those reactions will help guide you as to what's right for you or wrong for you. Now, as to what you do with those feelings, that's very much going to be up to you. So there are some folks who will talk about a crisis of faith that you have to push through. Keep believing your faith even when you have those doubts. Maybe that's okay. It's entirely up to you. But if you disagree with some aspect of what your faith or guru or what have you is telling you, then maybe that's something you need to address. And in fact, there are plenty of examples in history where completely new religions branch off from the main religion because the main one held certain beliefs that didn't align with the values of a certain group, and so they moved on for that. There are many people that have discomfort as a result of past traumas that they have personally experienced as part of a faith community, or maybe historically. Sometimes it's one of those examples of intergenerational trauma that we've talked about before. So these things can be addressed. There are a lot of therapeutic tools that we can use. However, you may not need to meet with a therapist for that. Just allowing yourself to be curious, what feelings are coming up. You can journal about it, talk with a friend about it, and explore what your feelings are telling you. This may take you more in the direction of a spirituality that will uplift you and will inspire you. Now, one thing that I haven't really talked about in this video is my own spiritual beliefs. And I'm still not going to, I'm afraid. As a professional, I feel it's somewhat important to keep that part of my life private, at least in content like this. But it's fair to say that I've come a long way, and I've had ups and downs in my own spiritual belief. It has certainly been a bumpy road. However, at this point in my life, my own beliefs help keep me going in the darkest days. They help me feel not alone. They help inspire me. And if nothing else, if you can allow the idea that perhaps you are loved or that you are deserving of love, and notice how it makes you feel. Whether that is a deity or nature, feeling part of something greater than yourself, part of a greater system, can be fulfilling, it can be uplifting, and it can help get you through some of those dark days. And in any process of change, we're going to have those days. We'll talk some more about those rocky days in the weeks to come. Thanks as always for your support, and we will see you again soon. Take care.